You know what I really like to do? I like to spend a lot of money on projects that only rich people can go to. Well, we've been talking a lot about that recently. If you've been listening this far, you know we have talked about the issues in London. You know that we've talked about how Paris isn't the city of love and light all the time. But we're going to take you back to actually when we first crossed the border for this trip, which was Monterrey.
Yeah.
And the ironic part is that we actually had a roommate from Monterrey.
Yes.
And we talked about going to Monterrey when we were roommates, but this, that, and the other thing happened, so that didn't happen. So, and you had never been to Monterrey before this, right?
No, no, never. Monterrey for me was very, very far always because it's in the north of the country, northeast part of the country. And even though I grew up part of my teenage years in the north part of the country, it was the northwest
Yeah.
side, basically next to the border with Arizona and California. But Monterrey is in a state called Nuevo León, and that state is it it's next to Texas at one point.
Yes.
Just the tip.
Which isn't just the tip. No, and it's why we could take this long bus ride from San Antonio
Yeah.
to get there. Uh, I'm glad that that was not the last bus that we rode on.
Yeah.
But no, it was a very long ride to get there. Uh, but this was my first time coming to Mexico outside of my family, and basically after hearing all the trash that's been said, especially since this is a year of a presidential election. Um, it's over. But basically, this was my first Mexican city as an adult, and I didn't know what to expect. I knew our roommate was one of the luckier people.
Yeah.
And so, since they were one of the luckier people, it's their experience in Monterrey was probably different from a lot of other people's.
Yeah.
And we stayed at an Airbnb largely because we didn't know the city at all.
Yeah. Both of us. And like you mentioned, you had already been to Mexico, but only one town next to the border, which I think it was
Nuevo Laredo.
Nuevo Laredo.
Hmm.
And yeah, you cannot get the experience of the country uh, after visiting a border town. Probably Tijuana, or or I don't know, but yeah, you don't
Tijuana
get
is bigger, so yeah, you
yeah,
might be right about that.
but you don't get even Tijuana. Tijuana is its own thing. Tijuana, it's something else. But yeah, it was a new experience for the both of us, and so we got there, and the weather wasn't as hot as Texas. I think
Not as hot. It was
it
hot.
was hot, but not as hot.
No. And I will say this, one of the things that I found about Mexico is that y'all use your weather to the best of your ability. Like, even if you're not necessarily in the coolest part of the country, they're like, yeah, but we're going to use our mountains. Yeah, but we're going to make sure that there's shade next to the window, that it doesn't feel like you're in a microwave every time you're inside, because air conditioning and is not a guaranteed part of existence,
No, no, not in Mexico. No.
which actually makes y'all more sustainable than we are. Congratulations. Because our big plan during the climate crisis is to turn up our air conditioning.
Yeah, which uh, is good for the in the short term, but no, not good in the long term because uh, all of the CO2 that creating that electrical energy to sustain all of those mini splits, all of those air conditioners everywhere. Well, they make the environment warmer.
And if you have ever been in an office building, because on Sunday, those commercial office spaces, those glass slabs, they'll turn the air conditioning off. And they'll turn the air conditioning off because as we've just discussed, it's a lot of energy to keep an air conditioning on
Yeah.
and air conditioner on. And so if you have ever been in a glass slab on a Sunday evening, you are mad at everyone and everything because it's just like being in a hot box and
Wow.
it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and you don't want to do it. And so that's actually one of the downsides to commercial space. But I find that in Mexico, even though there's not always a lot of air conditioning, the passive ventilation is off the chain. The the making sure that it's not always directly sunny. I mean, heck, uh, it was there was no direct sun into our room
Yeah.
when we were in Monterrey, and it's like that just makes that means that we don't even have to use the air conditioning all day.
Of course, there's all kinds of ways, passive ways to make a space less hot uh, without using energy, that much electrical energy. And air conditioning is like a, um last last resort.
Mm-hmm.
But we in Mexico, we love imitating you guys, and so
Yes.
yeah, you saw that, but actually, more and more people are getting air conditioned for their for their houses, and the planet is just getting warmer, and the architecture is those passive ventilation systems are basically nobody, very few architects use them. That's the bad news.
Which is weird, right? Because it's not like salaries are increasing to match the cost of living, and air conditioning means higher electricity bills. And the young people are like, look, we're just trying to live our lives and we can barely afford anything, but you're not going to make it so that we can at least stay cool while we strategize. I mean, it's a thing. So, and I think that's a great time to bring up the fact that beautiful architecture does not change the circumstances of where people are. And I think that not enough people understand that. Like, as somebody who has worked with urban planners uh, and done community engagement, it's like people always want to beat down on the residents and say, don't you want improvements? Don't you want improvements? And the reality is that quote unquote improvements just mean that everything costs more. That's all it means. It never means that there are consistent living wage jobs. A lot of those living wage jobs depend on disposable income. And it doesn't mean that people's standard of living has increased, because if everything costs more, that means everybody's working more. And this is an era where it's hard to find work.
Yeah. Yeah, because AI is taking over everything, and more processes are being automatized,
Automated, yes.
automated,
Yeah, automated.
and so yeah, basically we are we are going from bad to worse. I don't want to sound pessimist, but I also think that part of what you're talking about is how architecture is less worried about the comfort of the people that inhabit it, and more interested in the image that it projects to the particular brand that it represents, whether it be a university, whether it be a museum. But yeah, the image that it projects is more important than its most important purpose, which should be making the people uh, inhabiting those places feel more comfortable.
Well, and it's like, I think somewhere along the lines of existence, we forgot that architecture houses life. And the
Yes.
fact that architecture houses life means that no, you're not guaranteed for the paint to stay perfect. You're not guaranteed for the stonework to look great. You are guaranteed inhabiting inhabitants. That's all you're guaranteed. And more than that is putting an enormous amount of pressure added to the pressure of existence that already exists. Um, it's like, so we went to when we first got to Monterrey, we went to the city hall, and it's a gorgeous city hall,
Yeah.
but there is nowhere to sit. There is literally, I have never been to a city hall, and I love city halls,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never been to a city hall where there was nowhere to sit. And these buildings had been there because Monterrey is not particularly young.
No, no, it's old. Yeah.
And so I'm like, so this building has existed for at least a century, and there's nowhere to sit in it if you're not going to work.
Yeah. The story of Monterrey is pretty much industrial. Uh, the people who made that city were very hardworking people that couldn't find opportunities in the rest of the country, and they migrated there because there was an industrial boom, and there were opportunities for everybody. So the people who were there, the weather made them very resilient. People in Monterrey are very hardworking people, and those people can are made to withstand working in very harsh conditions. But oddly enough, I found them to be super nice, very nice people, very happy and agreeable people. Uh, you ask them for the directions, and they were super
They're concise.
yeah, and they go out of their way to help you get to where you want to go, and they ask you questions, and it's very very easy to make friends in Monterrey, I feel.
Oh, I know. If it was funny, I was actually thinking of use basically just doing a series on Uber drivers, because, well, yes, we're definitely users of public transportation in this brand new city where we don't know how to get anywhere.
Yeah.
We were definitely using Ubers when we first got there, and the first one was telling us, yeah, don't go out at night here. And we were confused, but then we realized, oh, yeah, our place was in the downtown area.
Yeah.
And downtowns are basically abandoned at night because they were only supposed to be for work.
Yeah, exactly. uh, yeah, that was the first day. I have to admit that I was going through a cultural shock because after uh, 2.5 years, almost 3 years of
Texas.
living in Texas and living in Austin and going to San Antonio a couple of times, and Dallas, Fort Worth, but that was it. And so going back made me clash with things that I thought I had forgotten, and suddenly I remembered the things that I dislike about my country, my culture. That was the first part. Uh, now I am more. Now I've grown accustomed to it, and now I am more comfortable here in Mexico. But yeah, I remember that first day. I I was uh, I was what's the word, like battling or with my internal.
We call it battling your inner demons.
Yeah, I was battling my inner demons and my malinchismo. For those who don't know, malinchismo comes from La Malinche. La Malinche was an indigenous woman who was Hernan Cortés' partner, and who basically helped him conquer basically the whole New Spain, and that's why we use that word malinchistas for the people who prefer things that are foreigner.
No, at least y'all have a word for it. And I mean, to be fair, all I have to do to remember why the issues with my country is turn on TV anywhere in the world. But yeah, to actually be, and this is one of the challenges that nobody really considers when they go on xenophobic rants. It's like being in another place is being in another place. It's not the same as, like, yes, life is life everywhere, but there are differences. And one of the things that is clear, especially in a city like Monterrey, is that a lot of people who are not from there must be taking a lot of the resources because it looks harder to live there than it should be.
What do you mean?
Like, basically, I feel like it is, they're you're talking about how uh, people like to imitate the United States.
Oh yeah.
And I think because people are trying to imitate high energy usage, highly consumptive lifestyles,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot harder than it needs to be. Because, I mean, Monterrey's been there for a while. Like, it shouldn't, it, I don't feel like there should be that much of a divide. There is clearly a divide uh, that we saw a little bit of, not a lot of, but a little bit of
You mean between
between the haves and the have-nots.
social classes?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Remember that movie that we saw? I'm Not Here.
Yes.
It was about
Or I
this.
am no longer
I
here.
am no longer here. You're
Yes.
right. It's a movie about a guy who is a teenager who is growing up in the poverty belts of Monterrey, and that Monterrey that we saw in that movie is very different from the Monterrey that we
Experienced when we were
experienced.
there.
Yeah. Even when we went to Santa Catarina to visit the Elemental building by Alejandro Aravena, which is a building made for a for a probably lower middle class.
Yeah.
Even that area was not as harsh as the poverty belts that we see in that movie. I am not longer here. So yeah, we the divide, but that's Mexico in a nutshell. Um, Mexico is uh, it's a country of contrasts.
Well, and it doesn't help that people are digging at you, trying to get your stuff all the time either. Like, it's not. I mean, one of the things that people don't really understand about imperialism and colonialism is that, yes, all these people have this wonderful idea about what they're going to do with these resources, but when you view people as barriers to things that you feel entitled to, you're not really paying attention to the lifestyle you're leaving people with
Yeah.
once you take those resources.
Oh yeah.
And one of the Uber drivers was talking about the fact that this bone dry river in the middle of the city
Yeah.
uh, what happened because of all the development. And he said a lot of people used a lot of water really quickly.
Yeah.
And yes, in theory, Monterrey is used to uh, regular water usage, rainy seasons, just like the majority of the rest of the country. But if everybody decides, oh, well, we're going to be here, well, then you have a bone dry river in the middle of the city because you pointed out that Austin and London have rivers running through the middle of it.
Yeah.
So does Monterrey in theory,
Yeah.
but it looks nothing like
No.
Austin or London.
Not at all. Not at all. Austin has that huge river. Huge river. Also, San Antonio has the river that crosses downtown, and basically the water presence in through San Antonio is also very very present and constant throughout the year. And Monterrey, it's dry. Its river it's dry most of the time. Guadalajara, we'll talk about that in another episode, but it used to have a river that run through the middle of the city, but it's basically dry now, and they intubated it, and so it now runs below an avenue, a huge avenue. So it disappeared. So yeah, the relationship that cities in Mexico have with rivers is very different from the relationship that um, cities in the United States or Europe have with their rivers, like Paris or London, etc., etc. Yeah,
Well, and it also stands to reason that it's like, yeah, y'all know how to use your water and not lose it, but we don't really have a way of kind of mellowing down. Like our somebody said about alternative fuel, it's like, yes, it can power a society, but probably not this one. And that's true. I mean, you and I were night shift workers when uh, when we lived in the United States, uh, and that working through the night, keeping machines on all night, keeping buildings climate controlled all night. Well, that's a lot more demanding than saying, look, the sun has set. And, people might say, oh, but we have the technology. It's like, yes, but as has already been discussed, people should be working less. And if people should be working less, then we shouldn't be demanding more from the planet. And if people were working less, and if people were consciously aware of the fact that it's like, no, there is a threshold, we cannot go past it, then we would have a very different life. And maybe Monterrey wouldn't be, maybe all of these places wouldn't be running out of water because the Mississippi was running out of water. And the Mississippi is literally one of the famous, most well known, and most consistent rivers in the United States.
I
But
didn't know that.
yeah, no, this when I in 2022 when I went to the Association for Bicycling and Pedestrian Professionals, they were there were people from Tennessee, and they said, yes, we're not getting the snowfall, so the river's drying up. And he showed pictures of a basically non existent Mississippi. And so building more because we think that we're entitled to more profit, more and more and more and more, like the land can't handle it. And that's what you start seeing in Monterrey. It's like they're, again, in the downtown area, they're the hotels, they're the businesses. Um, uh, but then when you go to the Elemental development, or you go past the Coca Cola factory, which we got to by bus,
Yeah,
uh,
a series of buses.
a series of buses, just like we got to Santa Catalina,
Ah, Santa Catarina.
Santa Catalina by bus. It's like you see the obvious division between what all of this beautiful development is supposed to do versus what people are actually living.
Yeah,
And so, you know, again, I do like Monterey. I do. The only
me too.
thing, but the challenge is that it was an almost immediate introduction to the fact that it's like you can do all the pretty pictures that you want to, but it's not just a pretty picture on your design screen. Somebody lives there and somebody's going to deal with the consequences of what you're doing.
Yeah, because the people that make that a reality, the working class, those people don't get the benefits of the places that they build, of the places that they work at. Um, they have to deal with a a reality that is more harsh, uh,
and honest.
and
Like
honest.
when you constantly flood your existence with other people's resources and with other and without regard for what comes next, well, you are basically lying to yourself. You're saying, oh, it doesn't matter, I can always have more. Which is why in the United States there was a famous house that was famous because it had 5 pools, like 21 bedrooms, 42 bathrooms, and it was just insane. Like, it clearly should have been a communal, like, I feel like a cult should be on the compound because it's just so huge.
Yeah.
But we see something like that and we encourage people to aspire to that
Yeah.
in the United States. Whereas in other countries, they use what they have 9 times out of 10 because they don't get any more. And they're not willing to go to war just so that they can live another year.
Yeah.
And so really, it's like all this development, all these beautiful buildings, they don't change life for people. And that is one of the things that I feel like urban planners desperately need to learn and learn fast, especially based in the United States. Because this surreality where there's always more, well, that's just a result of a delusional mindset. So,
I think you are talking also about the the public transport and the two realities that you saw in Monterrey, a city of contrasts, in a country of contrasts, because we went to visit uh, our first the first building that we went to visit, that we had on our list, wasn't the city hall. It was uh, a building made by an architect that you had already been introduced to
Fort
in Fort
Worth.
Worth, the Japanese architect Tadao Ando, who is very famous for his use of concrete and his uh, minimalist style, and because he used to be a boxer.
I was about
And
to say, you gotta say it.
you
You
gotta
gotta
say it,
say
and I said it. And
it.
we went to see that building. Uh, it's in a private university, uh, so we had an appointment. We 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 were at the door, and you saw how the guard, uh, whose skin was way darker than the average skin tone of the students.
Kind of like mine.
Yes, and so you and the way he treated me, I felt like I remembered. I was like, oh yes, of course. The most racist people in Mexico are the ones who are the most um, ostracized by the dominant narrative. People with light with clear with lighter skin tones.
So basically, the case system.
Yes, and people were with the more darker skin tones are have been the subject of a lot of racism, and henceforth since they are already since they have are working for a master, they feel like they are entitled to vote for Trump, to say it. I mean, we just saw what happened in the elections.
Yes, we sure did. And we
Uh,
were, and it was, and I'm just like, y'all, who do you think he's coming for?
the people who are the most used objects for racism become the most racist people. That happens a lot in Mexico and Mexicans who migrate to the United States, and so I felt that the way he treated me reminded me of the racism that exists in Mexico.
Are you kidding? That reminded me of a roommate I actually helped who was darker than I am, but was a Nigerian
Hmm.
uh, American. And she was just so thoroughly convinced that she was morally superior to me because she had a higher paying job than I did. And being darker, she's like, well, you should get it together. But that is also another thing that we saw in this election. There were a lot of African migrants who drank the Kool Aid and said, oh, but it's all it is hard work. And you and I saw lots of hardworking people not making any money. And so logic would tell you that that's not true. And so, this need to demand that people believe the propaganda, uh, because then and for you to enforce it, I mean, it doesn't make for a very reasonable existence, because quite frankly we can't have a world of enforcers. That's just irrational.
Yeah,
Nor can we have a world full of entitled people.
yeah,
Like, that dichotomy is what's actually making it harder.
yeah. But those people that have been ignored all of their lives, when they get a little bit of, or when they are in a position of authority, they they uh, become
That which they hate.
yeah, they become entitled, and that, yeah, exactly, that which they hate. And so, okay, we after being mistreated and not being, like, making it hard for us to get into the building even though we had an appointment. Finally, we managed to get access, and and we got to that university using an Uber, because if we had taken public transport, we wouldn't have gotten there in time. We wouldn't have got there in time.
No, it took about 2 hours.
Yeah, and that's another reality in Mexico, and especially in Monterrey. It's a car-centric city, as you could see, except for the people who cannot afford a car. Um, but that very same thing, you saw it happening in the other university, which is the most famous private university in the country. Uh, you also saw that entitlement from the person at the door. I
Yeah.
don't know if you noticed. Um,
I think I ignored it at some point because I
mhm.
was just like, I'm from the United States. I'm from a country of entitled people. I
Yeah,
cannot. I'm just not getting into it
yeah.
again.
It's a thing. And then here in Guadalajara, I think in at Iteso, oops, I said the name. Uh, a university here in Guadalajara, which I attended to. But that's another subject. Um, but yeah, it's a thing. The people, the gatekeeper,
Yes,
uh,
literally and
literally and
figuratively.
figuratively. And so we got access to, and we saw the building. But yeah, you don't get to see, you don't get to enjoy the the beautiful architecture that is being made uh, for the normally, because normally it's privatized.
Yeah.
While as at the end of that day, when we went to a very famous church made made in the 60s, um, that was beautiful architecture, and it was accessible to the public. So right now, nowadays, good architecture is a commodity.
Yes, it is.
It's guarded. It's not uh, for everybody. It's those ideals of architects in the 60s. Uh, they are now privatized. Architecture, good architecture, is privatized now
And
nowadays.
and that's why you have apartments that are not well insulated
Yeah,
for poor people, but for wealthy people, it's quiet, it's insulated, uh, it's comfortable.
yeah,
And even if you don't have that much space, it feels like a lot of space because you're not dealing with noise and heat and cold. And when you say to people that they have to work hard to be able to enjoy quiet, well, that's just ignoring the fact that people need quiet to be at rest. And so, no, forgetting that architecture houses life is one of the main reasons why, yes, you're seeing all this building, but it's not necessarily leading to a better life.
yeah. Nevertheless, I was very impressed by a an incredible park, Parque Fundidora,
Hmm.
which is public. It's free for all. It's huge, and it's first quality. Uh, a first quality example of landscape architecture, and except for one thing.
It doesn't have benches. Oh my gosh. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. How do you have parks that are not just chock full of benches? That's what a park is. And so yeah.
I hadn't noticed that until you mentioned it. Until you mentioned.
Well, no, and it's like that's like I am floored by how much the world will not let anybody rest. And yes, Parque Fundadora is beautiful. Different parks within a park, and it was very cool because we ran into some students who understood me to be a gringa immediately, and were very excited to practice with me.
Hmm.
But basically, they were walking through the park
Yeah,
because they don't there's really not a lot of places to sit. And imagine the detriment that saying hard work gets you what you need has done to so many people. There were places in airports that we went that didn't have seating, and an older woman said, oh well, yeah, that makes it easier to move through. And it's like, yeah, but how do you rest?
yeah,
How and that's the thing, we want everything to be easily moved through, but we don't want anybody to rest,
yeah.
just like the Marco.
Just like, yeah, oh, that's another great example of beautiful architecture. Um, it's not public, it was private. Uh, but yeah,
But you
no,
didn't
not,
get to sit down once you got in anyway.
yeah, no, another place without, yeah. Uh, that was the first in a series of many museums that we visited, um, with very, very little uh, amount of places to sit,
But
which are supposed to be a guarantee in a museum because you go there to appreciate art, and so they should give you the commodity to sit so that you can appreciate the art inside of them for as long as you want to.
But instead, you should take a picture with your cell phone and look at it later.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's really what we see museums full of. We see museums full of people with cell phones taking pictures of it so they can look at it later because there's nowhere for them to sit and think about it then.
Yeah, but again, I think I never thought of the importance of benches in public spaces, any museums, until you mentioned it.
Well, and again, the reality is that people deserve rest. And until building leads to rest, I can't say that I'm for a whole heck of a lot more building. I think we need to calm it down for a second and wait until people can sit down, and then maybe I'll be more on board with more building.
I think that that's a very powerful message, and I probably would like to finish the episode with that message. Um, People deserve more places to rest, and architecture should make sure that it provides them.
I'll agree with that. All right. Well, think the next time we'll see y'all is in Brussels. And so look forward to that. Signing out.
Signing out.